All right. So, welcome everyone to the August edition of the Kizuna Studio Roundtable. I am so excited to have several studio members with me here today to talk about, I think, a subject that very much lights each and every one of us up, which is on creativity and the creative spirit. So before we dive in, I would love if our assembled members could do a short, quick introduction of themselves so that people who are here on the live can get to know all of you better. Anyone? Any volunteers?
I can go.
Katie, go ahead.
Hi. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to have this chat. I was going through the questions before, and I'm really excited about it. So, hi, guys. I'm Katie. I work as an English specialist based in the UK. So I do writing, editing, teaching, coaching, everything to do with English language and literature. So that's just me. I've been sort of in my creator journey for a while now, since November. And yeah, that's been a real ride, and it's been wonderful to meet everyone and be part of the studio now. So that's me.
I'll go
Someone
ahead,
else?
Grace.
Go ahead,
Hi.
Laura.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura. I'm so excited, just like what Katie had mentioned, just to be able to participate in this discussion on the creative spirit. A little bit about me. I am an online English teacher as well as a writer. Right now, I'm at a hotel in San Francisco, but in a few weeks, I'll be in New York City. I'm just here to learn. I think that we're on this earth to pursue and to live out our greater purpose, which is very woo-woo to say, but I can't wait to talk with you all and learn from you.
Someone else? Yes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ephraim Champion. I am an active musician and composer based in Chicago. So that's pretty much it. I just write a lot of music. Yeah, nothing much to say.
Background is classical conservatory trained, right, Ephraim?
Yeah. So I compose for I compose concert classical music, and I also film compose. So it's pretty fun.
So I'm Olaf. I'm from Latvia, currently in Latvia. So I'm a innovation lead at a innovation management company. So I'm specializing in helping with internal innovation. So that's upskilling and facilitation. I also work as CEO of a media nonprofit that specialized in helping youth develop media projects and skills, and also have some other side things like volunteering in a biotech nonprofit. And overall, my education is from a chemistry background.
Very diverse set of wonderful individuals here. It's the thing that I'm most proud of about our studio. We have talked about creativity, I think, in a lot of different lenses over the past few months just within our community. But I love that everyone who is here, certainly in the work that you do, realize creativity in a lot of different ways. And so I want to kind of start off with kind of diving into that notion of creativity, because we are on LinkedIn. And I think people tend to, have this misconception about creativity in the sense that they limit it to what we perceive as the traditional arts, whether that be painting or music or some kind of design work or writing. And certainly we as a community have talked a lot about how creativity is so much more than that and can be incorporated no matter what field you're in, and it's realized in a lot of different ways. And so I guess I want to kind of start out with what creativity means to each of you, because each of you have sort of different perspectives, different sort of fields that you're in. How would you define creativity for yourself, and what does it mean to you?
I guess I'll start. Okay, so I come to the work that I do now by way of academia and education. And I basically, in my life and in my training, I'm a lifelong Shakespearean. And so I come to the notion of creativity through that lens. And I think of it very much as self-fashioning. So I really think about creativity and this being a self project, a project where you making your life into what you want it to be is creativity. So I think that it's a very holistic kind of understanding of it. And I've always been sort of naturally directed towards the language arts, but I've come to have a very kind of holistic notion of what it means to be creative. And I think it's a lot about the self, and that being the project, and the creative project being you becoming the version of yourself that is the one that you want to be in this life. So that's my thought.
That's beautiful. Someone else want to chime in? Laura, maybe?
Yeah, I'm going to actually piggyback on what Katie has mentioned, just because it's fresh in my mind. But how you mentioned that the self-fashioning, I do believe that we are our greatest work of art and creation. And so very simplistically for me as a creative, I think to create is really to make and create. But from a very young age, I've always considered myself not just a creative, but definitely an artist. And I'd love to dive into a conversation with you all between this distinction between artistry and also with creativity, and how they overlap. But just at the basic level, to be creative is really in the word itself, to create, to make. So I have other thoughts, but I'll let others speak first.
I love that. We're going to come back to that for sure. Okay, Ephraim.
Yeah. So yeah, this is a tough question, kind of. So like I understand what you're saying, Grace, because I feel like when people say, if I think about how people have called they're like, oh, you're so creative or something like that, it's usually because you're either like resourceful, I think, or you somehow can find like angles that others don't always find or something like that, or you find solutions to things that people didn't expect. You know, the odds were against you and all of that. So like you're either resourceful in ways, which I don't think a lot of people give themselves credit for in that lane of creativity, or it's because like you're in the arts or something, and somehow that means you have access to this higher level of imagination that only you can harness. And I just don't think that's I don't think that's true. Maybe we use our imagination a little bit more than, like, I don't know, maybe being a police officer and having to deal with the situation in front of you. Like, I have to deal with a blank piece of paper and live in my head all day. But so like maybe we use our imagination a lot, and I think that's where it kind of comes from, that whole creativity bit. But I think in general, creativity is just creation. It's just, to me, it's just about actualizing the ideas we have in our head, putting it on this tangible plane and like just getting those ideas out there. So yeah, it's very, I guess that's a very general definition, and it means everyone is creative, but that's the point, I think. So yeah.
I mean, I like how you brought in resourcefulness, because the word that comes to mind for me is presence. Because one thing that I think is related to creativity is being able to observe the world and have a new twist, a new perspective to it. So at the same time, also like linking together originality and novelty, because you're bringing in something that hasn't been there before, or put things together that have not been interconnected before. And I think that's a misconception where people look, okay, like, yeah, everyone relates creativity to art, but oftentimes, like, I see creativity everywhere through everything I do, where you just have new things to add, or combine things, or take lessons or perspectives from one industry to the other. So I think that's a core part of what creativity entails.
I love everything that all of you shared. I think, again, we see your different approaches depending on your field of work and what it is that you do. I think creativity, to your point, to all of your points, we are creating all the time. We are creating our life. We are creating our business. We are creating, new ideas. We're crafting problem solving in new ways. Ephraim, I love that use of the word resourcefulness, this sort of ability to bridge connections in new ways, in novel ways, that allows us to, problem solve in to your point, I think when we talk about creative, there's something indirect about it, right? Like it's not a logical step-by-step necessarily way of approaching it, but there's like an ability to be able to make connections. And so we think, oh, that's kind of an indirect, but it's very creative, and to approach problem solving, to Olav's point, also with innovation in that way, and to bring it to life. I want to kind of circle back before we forget about it, because I loved what Laura just brought up, and I want to just kind of dive into that, because I think it relates to, again, to each of your work and the work that you do. Laura talked about the difference between perhaps being a creative and being an artist, right? If I'm correct, Laura, was it? I'd love to hear. I have my own thoughts around it, but I would love to hear. Do all of you define yourselves? Do you think of yourselves as creatives? Do you think of yourselves as artists? Do you think there's a difference between the two? And what would that difference be? That's a fascinating door you opened, Laura. So I want to dive into it with all of you. Any thoughts, all of you?
Well, I suppose because I brought up the question, I'll start off. But the reason why, I've just been thinking a lot about it, especially with my observations, and you notice like there are so many people who are creative, and I do want to challenge the narrative that, as we know people who say that they're not creative, but I do think that is just, we get so stuck and put ourselves in boxes, where I do believe that it's in the human spirit to create. So for me, and I'm just looking back at some notes I've written, so to both Ephraim's and Olav's point, as far as with creating like the innovation and the resourcefulness, I do think a lot of the creativity in the creation process, there is that problem solving component. However, I do believe that the distinction is, I do think all art is in some capacity creative. However, there is a caveat. I do think that, let's say someone is just creating art, but it's just like, again, this is, feel free to challenge me as well. But for example, I guess a question that comes to mind is all art original? Because sometimes you can be an artist where all you do is copy. Like, let's say you have the picture of the Mona Lisa, and through the process of mimesis, you just copy it for how it is without any interpretation. So that in itself, to me, is not necessarily creative, even though that person is an artist. However, when you reinterpret it in your own way, in your own, using your perspective and your whatever vision it is, I do think that requires creativity. So in other words, I do think we are all artists, but for many artists will be creatives, but it requires us to refine our taste and really learn more about ourselves in order for us to bridge creativity and artistry. Because I do think that when you're an artist and you can be creative, and as a creative, you can also refine your taste. Okay, there's other thoughts, something else I want to add, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts. I also think that with creatives, often you think of the inventors or people who are creating products. And so they're creating this for the world, but I do think that artistry also requires this sense of a humanistic lens where you're creating something for humanity to bridge humans together. So my thoughts, it's soul work more. Okay, I'm curious for what everyone has to say.
I'll chime in.
This...
Okay, did all of us start talking at the same time? To make
no. Go ahead.
I think this is such an interesting question, whether or not the creative person is an artist, and whether or not that's necessarily the case. I think they are distinctive in the sense that I think in the way of awareness, I think that when you are purposefully creative, then you are an artist in whatever you are choosing to be creative in. So there's a sense of sort of, I don't know, owning it and doing it with purpose and the intentionality of it. To Olav's point, I really think that you can be creative in every field. And I think I think everyone is creative, in anyone who has the capacity within their profession to be put into the position of thinking laterally, problem solving, creating new solutions for problems. I think that all of that is creativity. I think that if it's done with purpose, then it's artistry. And I think that's my general thought for the moment. I'll throw that out there.
I don't have much to add because Katie and Laura already kind of went to the same direction I want to go. I read that art is something more towards legacy, but I already heard humanity and purpose, and I think that also kind of is towards the same direction. I think maybe even better descriptive. I think creation is a act or a process that everyone can do.
Mm.
So everyone is a creative. But I think when you look for art, you're looking outside of yourself. And so art, I think the term artist is more washed out. So creative should be more encompassing, and art should be less. And art is something where I think the primary goal is not the immediate return, because if we look historically, then a lot of artists have gotten famous only like after their lifetimes and so on. And so that's my take on that.
Yeah, I agree. I actually never really made a distinction between a creative and an artist. I just said I was both. But I mean, I'm certainly thinking about it now. I think that all makes sense. Like, to be an artist is kind of some, I don't know, like, yeah, the whole like legacy, humanistic aspect. Like, I think it's about, I think it's kind of like about leaving your mark. So yeah, I think I would agree. I think I would agree with that. I never really thought of the difference before, but yeah.
I was going to add something, Grace, if I
Go
may.
ahead.
I think
Go
that
ahead.
an interesting distinction between the two is obviously that is whether or not you're thinking of it like a noun or like if you're creative, that's an adjective, or whether or not you're considering that you're an artist, which is some kind of understanding of what an artist does. So we can be artistic, and not necessarily be an artist per se, depending on how you define it. We can be creative without being a creative, however we define that. So I just think it's interesting to consider those different modes potentially.
This is so fascinating. I love this conversation. Okay. Katie, that was a fabulous point. You're right. I think certainly people who are very particular about words, artistic and artist, and being creative versus creativity, it is different. I'm going to circle back to Laura, what you brought up. I have some ideas around this, just for me personally, and for those of you who may not know, because I didn't share, my background is as formerly as a concert pianist in the classical music world, and then I was a fiction author. So that's kind of the realm from which I operate from. But I think creativity, to all of your point, is inherent in everyone. It is a skill that I think perhaps we need to nurture better and develop better in our education system, because a lot of it is about thinking and how we approach things. And in that sense, you can be a creative if you, I think, are someone who employs creativity on perhaps a consistent basis. I think being an artist, and perhaps this ties a little bit more to what Olaf was saying, I think being an artist is a very particular distinction, in the sense that I think being an artist, and going back to what all of you said about this kind of humanistic approach, I think being an artist is something about the way in which you perceive and understand the world. There's something there that's also an additional layer of, whether it's sensitivity, perceptiveness, something, empathy. There's some way in which you connect with people and the world that's different. And the reason why that distinction is important is because I think when we talk about, certainly from my background in music and in writing, I've had the fortune also to be able to teach both music and writing. And there is a very significant difference between a music student or a writing student versus one whom you would call an artist of their own right. And that difference is really when they get to the point where they can realize truly the expression of their own individual voice. Because most students will imitate. This is a very normal thing. Music students, you learn by first absorbing the interpretation of their teachers, of other artists that you love. Same thing with writing. We absorb the influences of authors that we love, and we start to kind of initially maybe start out with that kind of style and voice until we start to figure out our own. And I think to really be able to be called an artist is when you're able to have that agency, that the strength to be able to stand in your own self and claim the expression of your own individual voice. And in order to do that, there are all of these aspects like trusting the way in which you perceive the world and the way in which you particularly understand and connect with people in the world around you. And so that's why I tie it to like a way, it's both like a way in which we perceive the world and then the realization and expression, the ownership of our own voice. So I do think that is different because a creative, for example, can do a lot of amazing work, but perhaps they're doing it in service to a client's vision or a brand's voice, or like, there are so many different factors that come into play, right, with that. And I think being an artist is that sort of individual realization. I don't know, those are kind of, and it ties into what Olaf was saying about legacy, because then you can look at people like Van Gogh or Kafka, people who weren't necessarily, while they were alive, considered an artist to the scale that we know them now, but the way in which they perceived things and the way in which they felt things and how that translated into their own expression transcended their death, right? And it became that legacy that stands the test of time. So I don't know, my thoughts around that. Hey, anyone?
Oh, I love that, Grace. That resonates so deeply. And this is more on a tangent, but I remember I was having a conversation with a friend at a coffee shop, and we were just talking about artists. There's the artist with the lowercase a, and then there's the artist with the uppercase A. Artists like we know as Van Gogh or Da Vinci, whoever you love and adore, who you consider your muses as your artists, those are the capital A artists. However, I've come to this realization because I can only imagine, think of how all the artists, and this also counts for creatives, it's also about iteration and refinement. So think of the hundreds and thousands of iterations with every short story or novel. Like if we think too much about leaving a legacy and creating our magnum opus or opus, where that's all, we only focus on that, then we forget about that creative process where, like you mentioned, Olaf, it is that creative process. And I do think that we have to humble ourselves as creatives and artists to realize we need to be the lowercase artist, because that's how we create our greatest works of art, whether or not we see it in this lifetime or whether or not it does leave a legacy. I think that's our goal in life, to create something that is with conviction. I'm using your words, Grace, conviction. But I think it's a tangent, but I do feel so deeply what you mentioned. Everything that you said about the creative process, about the perception, how we go about life, seeing the world. No. And that's the end of my tangent. I was just making connections.
But that opens, I love that, Laura. You also brought up a very important point again about something that is also, I think, innate to the nature of creativity, and certainly this artistic process, which is practice, right? The process, that we cannot jump from 0 to a million without doing all of the tiny steps in between that. And so I want to talk to all of you about that, about your own creative process. It is quite possibly the most frustrating, can be one of the most frustrating things to go through, but that is the nature of kind of realizing and creating something. Can you share either in the work that you do, if there's a particular process that you have? If not, can you talk about, maybe share what happens if you're maybe frustrated with the process and how you might tackle it, or some ways in which you've previously tackled it? Any thoughts around there?
I can give a stab at it. Yeah, so I mean, I would like to say that, like, I go to, if I'm struggling on one project, I just go to another one and that influences the other. And maybe that's happened sometimes, but I don't know if that's true for me anymore as much. I think in a way it's kind of like I'm just running away from my problems, but I think it's in an interesting way. Like like if I'm struggling with something, I'll sit with it for a while, like a musical idea. So I'll sit with it for a while, but I won't go longer than what is necessary, because I still want to get something done. So I might go to like a different project that I have an idea for. So when I'm doing that, I'm not really thinking about what I was struggling with at all, actually. But at the same time, when I'm not working on anything, I'm thinking about the creative like problem I was having a lot. Like I think about it a lot. I kind of obsess over it because I really believe in this the sort of like incubation process where I think if we signal to our brains that this creative issue I'm struggling with, is important, and like I need to come up with an idea for this. I think like creativity has taught me that the solution always does come, but so you have to be patient enough, but it needs to be like active patience. You need to do something with that time. So I'm always about like, so that's the way I like nourish creativity and everything. I'm always about like meeting it halfway. I treat it like its own entity. So I like believe in manifesting, but I also believe in like doing something to bring that manifestation about. You know what I mean? So yeah, so it's that whole like incubation process and then eventually like while you're washing the dishes or you're in a porta potty or you're like walking your dog or something, the idea comes. And it's because like I've been thinking about it forever, like when I wasn't working on it, or I sat with it every day, like, oh, this idea is trash. I'll go with something else. Or I sit at the piano, I keep working at it. It doesn't come then, but it's like it always comes during like downtime. It is how I feel like my I get the answers to my problems. So yeah, so that's kind of how I treat my process, I'd say.
I feel I have an interesting perspective because I'm mostly working in trying to get creativity in groups. So that's either brainstorming sessions or collaborative work to find new ideas. And most of the times, the hardest part is just getting everyone in one room and getting everyone to like speak up and start going into more interesting directions. Like usually that happens naturally, but there's just a time focus, and the question is like how to get it faster. Because once you get it there, like people already get open up, start looking more broadly towards the problem. I think that's the problem where people limit themselves in creativity, is going too narrow, too specialized, and then just like instead of going broad and looking at various possible ways to tackle it. And to bring back to the point on creativity and artistry, I actually want to contest the idea flow you had, because I think the idea of like nuance and specialty, it's part of the creative process. I think where really the difference comes, it's still like you still eventually create something. I think the difference is like what is the end product for art. For creation, it's not about the end result as much as it is for the process. And there's like you might have different level of skills, but you need some like expertise level of skill and like a vision beyond yourself to have something that's art. So yeah, that's my take.
Oh,
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that's a really smart distinction to make about the end product versus the process when it comes to artistry and creativity. I think that's a really, really smart, like astute distinction. And it makes sense. I suppose it depends on how, again, I keep coming back to this holistic idea that I have about creativity. And I feel like everything that we are doing is creative in our lives. And so I have some sense of that being all about the process. I'm not wanting to say that that isn't artistry for some reason, I guess, because I attribute a kind of a refinement and elegance and wonder to art. And I think that that's a part of everything that we do when we're being creative. But I do think it's very interesting to consider end product and process as being, I think that was really, really interesting.
for me, I just wanted to add, at least with my relationship with the creative process, I wrestle with it all the time. I think for me, the easy part is actually just putting the words on paper. That I don't struggle with, but it's that moment when I have to come face to face with now this page where I know that there are so many flaws and imperfections, and battling that inner critic that knows there's so much wrong, and kind of reconciling that, you know what, I need to trust myself as a creative, that I can problem solve. as an artist, that I can work through the unknown, the darkness, where it really isn't the unknown. I have the words on paper. And so I think the more that we understand that resistance is also part of the process, and then we prove ourselves right every time, because there are going to be so many moments in doubt where we feel that we can't do it. Or at least for me, I do think it is something I still struggle with, but every time I prove to myself right that I can do those edits, that's how I build my confidence as both a creative and an artist.
These are such, yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Katie.
No,
go ahead.
I think the reason why I wanted to chime in on what Laura was saying was because in the instant that you were talking about your writing, my editor hat goes on, and I think about the fact that in the work that I do, I'm always switching hats. Like I'm always having, and this is to problem solve on behalf of the person that I'm working with, to help them reach their end self-expression that they need to produce in the world. But I just think it's really interesting how, as creatives, sometimes we have to shift into a different role that we have. And this is very much when everyone was talking about their creative process, that's mine, that I basically have these different hats and roles that I wear. Roles and hats that I wear, and that I constantly have to shift between those roles. And I actually really enjoy that process, because that's how I solve the problem. That's how I get to the place where I produce whatever that end result is that you want. And I think this is why, coming back to Olaf's idea about end product and the process, my instinct is to go for a combination of those elements somehow, with creativity and artistry as one. For some reason, I don't want to separate out these sort of modes and ways of being, but I just think it's really interesting. The editor in me was just like, oh, ding, ding. I really heard that editor kind of role needs to come in. It's so true.
There's so many wonderful points here. I love it. I love it so much. Olaf, to your point, I love what you said. I do think there is a difference. So let me ask you this. I would love your thoughts on this, Olaf. So, for example, I don't play publicly anymore. So I don't have an end product. I don't do a performance anymore. Occasionally I might, every couple of years, I'll do it. Does that take away? So the reason why I ask this is because whether someone's work is realized or not, I guess publicly or in some way in which others can interact with it, does that take away the artistry or the art itself? Because I also have 2 books that I've never published, but I have written them, novels that I finished, and I will never publish them. But does that take away? So I wanted to ask your thoughts on that. Yeah, first.
I think the initial point is that creativity is not about the end result. Creativity is just like, you do not limit yourself and do not like limit on what's real and what's not. About artistry, I don't know. It's just a spicy opinion I have, because like where it comes from is from a point on like all the contemporary art, and where is the art and what is not art. And I still haven't figured that out, but listening to like your presentation on creativity, you mentioned that originality, let me read that. The quality of being special and interesting, and not the same as anything or anyone else. So that's part of originality, which is tied into creativity. So in the part where it says interesting, it already like has a subjective take. So it's kind of, we go to the part that art is subjective by definition. So that's like a kind of weird paradox where I'm at. So I don't have that completely figured out. Because if you approach like from the definition lens where you went in your presentation, then it kind of moves into the direction that art is subjective. But there's kind of that feel that it has to have some objectivity, and then the question where that lies, and is it in the effort, is it in the impact, where the art part resides.
I love this so much, because right now, at this very moment, I am struggling to write an essay on the difference between taste and quality. Taste is subjective. Can we say quality is objective, though? Objectively, because it depends on, like, for example, if you are looking for the best $1 pizza in New York, quality in terms of of what you're looking for is going to be different than, say, I'm looking for the best, vegan 5-star meal in New York, right? So it depends on so many things. I love that you brought that up, Olaf, because yes, I don't have an answer. So I don't have an answer. I don't think anyone's. I'm trying to explore that idea myself as well, because I think it's very interesting, because it goes back to also what Laura was saying about and also what Katie was saying about refinement, right? And practice and the process of all of that, which in the sense of, if quality is objective, if this idea of there is some objective idea of what we're moving towards, right? That we put that in. But I think all of this, everything that all of you have said and what we're discussing right now, lends to this idea of this sort of tension, right? And Laura said resistance. We talked about how letting go, but then what did that wonderful phrase you used, Ephraim? Active patience. You have to let it go, but then at the same time, there has to be some sort of like pull towards it, an effort towards it. And this is such a difficult balance to walk. I mean, I struggle with this constantly. My thing is, like you, Ephraim, I tend to like walk away. I do think that there is a simmering or percolating period that's necessary, I found, in just terms of ideas, and when it's ready, oftentimes in the oddest ways, it will pop up the solution. But I also sometimes feel that how do I say this? I block myself from, and by blocking myself, for example, as not writing, I need more time to think, or not doing something because I need more time to think, and procrastinating that. And then in doing that, of course, I block all the other ideas that I know come if I would just sit down, and no matter how awful those 500 words are, if I just put it out there, it unlocks the door for everything else to come out. So I am aware of that myself. That's my issue that I tend to struggle with. But I think that there is this, I don't know if any of you have any thoughts around this kind of push-pull, this kind of resistance, and how to navigate it better. I'm just trying to be more aware of it, and that's how I kind of deal with it. But yeah.
I was going to offer something to that, Grace, because I think it comes back to Ephraim's point about needing to walk away from the work and having that kind of downtime that then the creative idea comes. I can't remember where I read this, but it was in a book recently, and it was a fantastic analogy about the brain and how it is that we think of our focus as a kind of a spotlight. If we imagine that our focus is a spotlight that we might have, that we have this strange idea that we're supposed to focus all the time in our work in order to be creative, but that the analogy that was made was that the brain is like an orchestra, and that if we consider that focus is like a solo violinist in that orchestra, you can focus, but that's only one part of what has to happen in an orchestra, that the rest of your brain comes alive in fallow times, when you go walking, when you do other things, that a lot happens in your brain when you're not focusing. And that in fact, we need that in order for the whole creative process to happen in our mind. So I thought that was a really interesting idea, that we think we're supposed to focus, but it's a combination of those things ultimately that makes the creativity or the art happen.
Yes. Okay. Something else. I do everything. Yes. Okay. I also think what's also happening is because we are also feeling the guilt of knowing, like, we know that we need that time to focus, but we also need that time for our minds to wander. But I think, or at least for me, I can't speak for everyone. I think my issue is, okay, I guess the short story why I'm here at this hotel room is I thought I would accomplish a lot if I just kind of confined myself, locked myself in a hotel room. But usually it doesn't end up working that way, where you're just super productive in this environment. You actually, or for me, I actually have to go out to walk. I need to live. And I think sometimes for me, I feel this guilt that, oh, well, I've only written a few hundred words. I should have written so much more. And then we get stuck. We silo ourselves in that type of mindset, that the other parts of ourselves that really needs that nourishment to live, to let those thoughts wander so that we can make those connections and problem solve. That doesn't end up happening because we now narrow in so much, and we pour all that guilt into there where we really aren't able to steep in our ideas and problem solve, and really on the full spectrum, embrace the parts of ourselves that, well, embrace all parts of the creative process, not just sitting down and getting the words in. So a little bit, I kind of meandered there, but I just know for me, it's a lot of it is also that guilt, the guilt of feeling that I'm not being productive when it's supposed to be part of the process to daydream.
That part as being crucial to work, part of work, right? That's the reframe that's so difficult to kind of grasp. But this kind of segues into something I did want to ask all of you, because I've spoken a lot about how, when we, and this really comes into play when you're doing creative work, if you are executing constantly, just output, there reaches a point where certainly it becomes almost impossible to create anymore. The work suffers, and of course, you personally are emotionally and mentally drained. So I am trying, and I have been very conscious of that in 2024, about being more balanced with the inputs, right? That again, balancing that in order for creation to be realized, to nourish myself, to be inspired, so that my creativity can also continue to grow and develop and be fed and not be starved. So I wonder if all of you have, how do you nourish your creativity? Is there something that you do particularly that helps to kind of inspire you or get ideas going, or where you feel like, oh, your cup is filled? What do all of you do?
Okay, so you know how, Grace, you mentioned that you feel that for seasons in your life, you felt that there was just output, output, output. For me, I think it's the opposite. I think I'm in a season of life where I need to produce more, because I feel that there's so much inspiration. And to answer your question, how do I nourish myself? Again, yes, going for a walk, but for me, it's travel, actually meeting new people who have different perspectives than my own. And I would say, in all my travels and just meeting new people and just not just meeting or observing, we actually have to interact with the world, because you can go out in the world and observing does help a lot, but unless you're actually interacting with other humans, that's where I feel the most my cup is just filled to the brim. And it's almost like from there, then it's like I can only feel like I need to journal it down. I need to find a way to express all of, no, I think for me, or to answer your question, I think, at least for me, I feel that there's so much inspiration all around us, but we also have to make the call. Are we in a season of life where we need to do more or find more inputs? Or if we are in a season of life where we need to start producing more? So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I like that. I kind of have I don't know, I'm gonna try to work through this a little, because so I would say, okay, so I feel like we're kind of talking about burnout in a way, right? And I would say that, like, I feel like creators or just creative people, they talk about momentum as if, like, once you achieve it, the world just opens up for you, and like you'll just keep going and you'll just be cruising. And I think burnout will uproot any momentum you've ever built. Like it'll just destroy everything. Because I mean, I've personally felt that with there's a time I was writing like super consistently. Like I was writing a lot of articles, and I did like 191 days or something like that, and then I just like crashed for months. Like I just didn't do anything. So I think that's what put me in, like what Laura was talking about, like a season of like coming out of that. I'm much more in like a season of input. Like I don't really have the problem of like, oh, I have too much output right now, because I'm just, because now I feel like I've just been resting forever, and now it's like time to do some things, and I have a lot of ideas and all of that. So I would say, like, but during that time, I guess I didn't really deal with it. I just I got to the point where, like it's almost like burnout can stop you from recovering if you let it get to, if you dig a hole too deep where you can't even make the climb out. You know what I mean? So I feel like some people have just given up on their dreams because of like too much output and all that. So I think how I would deal with it now though, and maybe I've done this a little bit in ways if I'm like, if I kind of have too much of a workload, or I'm doing a little too much. I think what I do is I would like go back to the things that inspired me uh, to get into what I'm doing in the first place. I think so. You know, like if I'm doing like media composition, I go back to like listen to the film scores that made me want to do this in the first place, or like if I'm just like writing classical music, you know, I go and consume the art that I love, or I go to a concert or something like that, and that's what like reminds me, you know, to see the people there and everyone listening, and I don't know, something to remind me of the dream. You know what I mean? I think that's what would like, that's kind of what recalibrates things for me. And then I just have to take my time. But yeah, I can say that I've definitely not dealt with it before. And I feel like I almost didn't recover. Even now, I still don't write as much as I used to, even though like I love it and stuff. So like I'm trying to get back into that. So yeah, it's a hard thing to deal with.
I, you said you don't write like you used to, so I think we skipped the part where we define where is creativity. Because for me, the creativity is the phase of bringing ideas, bringing new concepts, bringing new perspectives, and then follows the work. I mean, many of you describe the work that follows after the creative process. And I think there should be a distinction, because for me, like creativity is you go all out, what's something new we can do here? What's something new we can add to things we have, or in other ways, remove from things we want to tackle? And then comes the work. Because in my writing, I don't think of the writing as the creative part. I look at the idea brainstorming as the creative part. And I think like to nourish that, back to the original point, I just like, how do I get more inputs so I can put more connections with me, with what I'm doing? So that's just like not focusing on the things I do, but sometimes just consuming things that aren't necessarily related to the end goals I want to achieve. Like I'm not doing this anymore because I forgot, but might return to this after today. It's just like having a playlist. So Spotify has like, you can listen by genres. So you can Google like all genres of music and then just go one by one and like hear a little bit of everything, or just like expand into like new domains in genres of movies or stuff like that. Or I think a lot of my new ideas come from just consuming memes, which is a pretty interesting thing to do. But also like you see new concepts, you see new things to put together, and the concept of meme is like you put several things that aren't interconnected, like present in a new way. So that's my point too.
I think that's definitely a great point. Like that's the whole I feel like that's the whole cross-pollination idea where and I definitely do get a lot of ideas that way, kind of like, you know, I feel like our idea process and creativity is just, it's an amalgamation of everything we consume. So I think that definitely does, I think that definitely does help. I also, I guess with the whole thing that I was talking about with writing, I see what you mean there, because I think, I don't know, I guess the other thing was that I just can't, I also, part of like actually being in the process is what causes like the ideation for me as well. So I think that's why I'm like, you know, when I'm talking about writing and the process itself, is because like the process is part of the brainstorming for me. Like I can consume things, but I can also not do. I think the connection is made when I'm also in the process as well. I don't know how many. I wish there was a way I could measure it. I don't know how many ideas I've gotten kind of from like the exploration or just trying to think of ideas like solely. I think it's when I go and consume other things, but because I've been, I don't know, writing, or because I've been composing and I go to do that, now I'm making the connection. So I think it's like in tandem, if that makes sense.
The most interesting thing that's happening to me as part of this conversation is that I'm realizing that the nature of my own creativity is really different, I think, than a lot of other people's. I feel like because I think my whole life is this process of art, and I really do, I'm realizing the extent to which I believe this and how much I live by this. I come back to your notion, Grace, of inputs, because I find that I need to find balance in my life between those inputs and between work and between the things that I love to do, the walking, the doing, the ideation, everything, the process of writing, the process of coming up with those ideas, all of it has to be in a kind of harmony. And I'm constantly striving for that harmony. I'm constantly looking around and thinking, oh, I need to do a little more of that, or I need to do less of this. And so it's just constant. And this is why I think about the notion of the output at the end being something about what we're doing when we're being artists. I'm certain that I think I'm with Olaf, the whole process of this, it's the doing of it, I believe, is really where the art is happening, where the creativity is happening. I do think the outputs are very important. We want to see those manifestations of our creativity. But I think when I come back to what I need, I think about reading my fiction. I think about going for my walks. I think about, am I getting enough exercise? Am I eating well? I think, am I doing all of these things that help me to function optimally? And when I'm doing that, then I feel like that's where the best creativity happens and where my life starts to manifest its greatest products, as it were. So that's me, and just thinking about life and balance and harmony, really.
I think all of your points are absolutely, I deeply resonate with all of them. I think, yes, when I talk about outputs, I think what I mean by that is that the output will reflect the process, right? Like, and the process is what's important. That's where all the good stuff is. That's where the art is. That's where the value is in and of itself, regardless of what the result end up being, because it's what you learn, it's what you do, and then that in the end. For example, let's use an example. Let's say you write a fiction novel that perhaps you release it and it doesn't commercially do very well or anything, but you know, just in the process itself of having created it, the beauty of it, what you learned, all of it. And all of that is reflected in the work, but we cannot control all the other things, right? Everything else around it. So I love also that Olaf and Laura also brought up this idea of new connections, of doing the new, whether that's new interactions with others, or Olaf to stimulate ourselves by like engaging in something new, whatever that may be, a new genre of music, new kind of film, or a new kind of art, to be able to create those different passageways. For me also, I think, like you, Katie, and also Ephraim, I love going back to read the things that light me up, or to listen to the recordings or the music that lights me up. But I am also very conscious, also Olaf and Laura, to your point about that new experience. I try to balance it with those two things, where I go back and find joy in the things the routines that I know help to ground me. Again, this is the push-pull, right? It's such an interesting process. There's where creativity, which is the act of birthing something, right? Giving birth to something, where it comes from, this kind of push-pull of going back to what it is that grounds me, that I know nourishes me and lights me up, while at the same time challenge myself to constantly make new connections and keep that muscle kind of new. And somehow between all of that, in some interesting way, we give birth to a new idea or to innovation. So speaking of which is a very, this idea, when I talk about giving birth, is a very sort of living a concept associated with life. I want to tie it into our last question as we're heading into the end of this, regarding AI and technology. So when we talk about everything that we have talked about from a very humanistic, very human-centered sort of point of view, we have AI now. There's a lot of obviously discussion around how it will affect. Many times people use the word disrupt certainly the creative fields or creative work. I would love to hear sort of your thoughts on where you think AI fits into creativity. Any thoughts on what it may look like in the future down the line? What are your approaches to all of it? I know all of you have some very strong ideas, I'm sure. I'd love to hear that.
I feel like I want to chime in straight away on this one, just because I really think I have full faith that AI is going to break creativity wide open broadly for people. I think that it's my hope that what will happen is that AI will help to take care of a lot of the drudgery that and the work that, you know, humans that have kept many people from being creative in their lives, that have kept them sort of in jobs and roles where they weren't able to do creative work. And if we can have AI do all that and let people start to become creative and use the tools to problem solve and create all sorts of new art, I think it has the potential to just make the world this wonderful creative place where everyone gets to take part. That's my hope. I hope that everyone has the chance to be creative with AI. That's what I hope.
So I'll chime in. I actually tried to drop a link to the article I want to reference in LinkedIn, but that doesn't allow it. So there's a pretty fascinating article in Science that's been published lately, July. So generative AI enhances individual creativity, but reduces the collective diversity of novel content. So you can type that in and find the Science article on Google. So the idea is what they found is that AI can help enhance individual creativity, especially for people who are starting out. But once you apply this at scale, the content becomes more homogeneous and more similar and more like structure-wise. So I think that's what's the interesting part, and I think that's also shapes the general tendency, the general trend of people using AI. So I think that's like pretty applicable to a social context where people will use AI and they'll get better at something themselves, but together collectively everything will become more similar, which is kind of interesting because it kind of ties in with content creation online, where you see like, yeah, the hacks and all the tips and tricks work, but once everyone starts doing it, then like the quality flops, like it drops. And so I think that like with AI, we're going into similar direction, and I think that's like with that article, it's like a very nice thing because that they like outlined more in scientific terms.
Can I offer a thought in response to that? What may I? I know we have to finish off, but I was just going to say, as if we can teach people how to prompt in ways that are really individual, and this is where the language arts can really come in to break this wide open. It can, if you look out and see people who are getting really into prompting with generative AI, they're creating very different art. It's not all samey when they get out there and they're getting increasingly detailed and refined on their prompts. So this is something really interesting that's happened. And I'll just put that out there, is that if we have people practicing writing more creatively into the AI, then that individuality can come through in the art that they make.
And to add to your point, I think I'll give some practical tips on how to do that. Because one thing that's AI, you can do with AI is have something like a write print or voice print, where you basically give your writings to the AI, and it like defines, hey, there's your tone, there's your style, and you can use that to like have templates made for you faster in your style, in your expression. Like it won't be absolute, but that will be something more organic than just using the inbuilt templates. Oh, here's an article generator, here's something. But when you have already, oh, there's this style, there's this voice, or when you need to adopt and use this technique to find something that you like, and then try to tweak it to your needs.
Yeah, I'm gonna chime in here because I don't have much to say on this. But I would say, yeah, I really like. I mean, I'm as hopeful as Katie. I really like what you said just about AI. Like, I think a lot of creatives and just people in general are just like, well, everyone's creative, but I think everyone's just kind of freaking out about it, and I'm very much so trying to see things for as they are, but not worse than they are. That's like my favorite Tony Robbins quote. So like, I'm like, I don't know. I look at the situation, but I'm not trying to like freak out about it unnecessarily. Like, I think it's unavoidable that AI will continue to keep growing and all of that. But like, I'm all for using it like as a supplement to the work rather than doing the work for you or anything. Like me personally, I don't even know how that like, I've never used it for music. But I have used it, for example, to generate a title for like a piece of music. Like with like I've done prompt stuff to like say, okay, I have a symphony idea around like these concepts, and I have already a title like this, but something about it doesn't sound right. Can you like fix it? You know, like, so I'll do things like that. But in terms of actual composing, I still, you know, I don't think I would ever, I mean, who knows, but I don't think I would ever use it in my work. So like, I'm all for using it kind of like to supplement or kind of, I don't know, kind of take care of the mundane task or to help you, um, I don't know, to help you think about certain things that you probably couldn't do on your own. I don't know. But yeah, I haven't given much thought other to, I'm just not trying to freak out about it and worry about losing work and all these things. So yeah.
I know our time is short, but I'll try to keep this quick. I love how Katie, okay, Katie, that is so uplifting and helpful as far as your, when it comes to AI. And honestly, I'm glad that you brought up that perspective because it gave me some food for thought. Personally, I do not worry about AI as a fiction writer, as an artist, more because I know that the people that I want to connect with are, they're looking for the human behind the words. And so for me, it's also that faith, but it's not a blind faith. It's that hopeful faith that I will find my people, people who want to read books that are created by humans. I mean, I am not against using AI as a tool to help. I just know that long term, just human nature, I think human nature is for humans or people to sometimes use those type of tools as a crutch. And so even though it can give us this opportunities, many opportunities for us to be creative, I'm not usually a cynic, I'm not usually a skeptic, but I can only see that being an issue where people won't use it for what it could be, the potential. They'll use it for, for as that crutch. But anyways, no, I don't worry at all. I think the future is still bright for artists, for creatives, and we can work alongside AI. But no, I've loved this conversation, even though it's coming to an end.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'm just going to add one quick, because this is such a, I love everything you just said. I am in agreement with all of you. I think that people are unnecessarily, I think, getting a bit catastrophic in their thinking regarding AI. I do think of it as an opportunity. That's the part, right? It's an opportunity in which we can challenge how we think. That's a wonderful thing. There's nothing better than that. And we have an opportunity as a civilization, as a species, as a whole, to reconsider, what is valuable and how we think and how we consider things and approach things. And to Laura's point that the ones who use it as a shortcut, who use it as a crutch, are the ones who are perhaps afraid to challenge themselves to think in that kind of way. But I'm hopeful that as a civilization as a whole, that this will present us with that kind of opportunity. Thank you so much to all of you for this marvelously fascinating discussion. How wonderful. It is very rare to be able to put together these kinds of such diverse, intelligent, such rich human beings together to have a conversation on creativity and artistry. And so I am deeply appreciative to all of you. If you could share very quickly, where can everyone find you? If you could share it with anyone who's watching this later, also on YouTube. How can people connect with you?
Yes, for me, my name is Laura. You can find me on Substack, as well as on X, Laura Gulbranson. No, and then we'll have it written out, I'm sure, Grace, for those who are viewing.
Okay.
Yeah, I can go. I am on like every platform. So I like I'm on video stuff is like Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and then I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on X, I'm on SoundCloud, I'm on Medium with a lot of my writing stuff. I just finished my website. I'm happy to say it's live, EphraimChampion.com. It's okay. I don't like WordPress at all, but I finished it. It's done for now. And that's where you can find just everything. I try to like bring everything there. And I'm in the process of moving my newsletter over to Substack actually, but I think the links in all my bios lead to my newsletter and stuff too. So yeah.
Well, if Ephraim is everywhere, then I'm nowhere. No, but I have a Substack, so that's Olavs, avs.substack.com, and also on LinkedIn with the name you can see written here, which has the weird Latvian characters.
I was gonna say, Ephraim, no one likes WordPress. Like WordPress, it sucks for everyone. Anyway, that being said, I'm also everywhere, but I'm primarily on Twitter, X, and on LinkedIn as Katie Musgrave, and I have my website too as well, where I can be found and searched. That's me.
All right, so everyone who's watching this, thank you for joining us, both on our live and later watching this on YouTube. As you can see, the Kizuna Studio is filled with such extraordinary members. We are very, very lucky to have such a beautiful community. If you are interested in finding out more about the Kizuna Studio, I will leave links below, either in the comment section or in the description of this video. You can find me mostly on X, sometimes on LinkedIn, and I am now starting to post on YouTube, but I am mostly on Substack at this point right now, which I will also link below. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining me, and for everyone who listened in. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, Grace. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.